we are about to start what for me has been my personal favorite session. I've been looking forward to this ever since I came to know we're going to share data. At heart, I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in biochemistry from the Indian Institute of Science, so I've always loved to understand data and pull it together, tear it apart. So it's really exciting for me to see what we can do about data and philanthropy. It's wonderful. We are here to understand the giving patterns a little bit better, both in the US and in India, in our communities. And core to this is the sort of landscape shift difference between the US and India. In the US, there are the total giving is $590 billion. Okay, 2/3 of which, yes, it's phenomenal. Americans give the most, and 2/3 of that giving is from individuals. Okay, $392 billion are given by individuals in this country. Yes, it's truly incredible. In India, the pattern is different, shaped more by that 2014 CSR rule. Companies give more. In the US, the companies give 7% of the total giving, individuals 60-something%. So in this context, to help us understand this a bit more, I have two amazing people here. Swetha Totapally is a partner at Dalberg Advisors. She's also one of Dalberg's most prolific authors. Her efforts have influenced national discourse and policies, particularly in India, and her work is widely cited in research and news publications. She was the principal of the first 2018 Dalberg study, which we all watched and read and talked about, and it shattered many things for us, including pointing out that we volunteer well, better than the rest of the American public, but we don't give quite as much. And there was a giving gap of $2 to $3 billion. And she's also the principal of the study that is being reviewed today, and you have the report in your chairs. Miller Taylor is a senior advisor with Giving Tuesday. She supports community programming aimed at building movements of generosity that catalyze civic engagement and strengthen the social fabric of civil society. Before joining Giving Tuesday, she co-led many big and strategic efforts that built networks, partnerships, and programming that promoted civic participation. So we have two amazing people here to help us understand this. So I want to get straight to the data, this big reveal. Swetha, help us understand what is the research findings that you were able to unearth. How much are we giving as a community, diaspora in the US? How much are we giving as a percentage of our income? A lot has been done since your last study in this community, including India Giving Day. I have to give a plug to the IPA flagship effort. It has been an enormous exercise in collective giving, and with the result of perhaps having more impact, collective impact. So that is something that we're in our 4th year soon. So that's been a big factor. And then efforts like this kind of summit, which has happened once a year at least, and the Indian Diaspora community has always had philanthropy as one of its pillars, and that's great. And also, Dasra and the Giving Pie community has, brought families together, both in the US and in India. So I just want to understand that with all that, has there been any upshift? And please tell us where we are.
Thanks, Nalini. And before I get into where we are, I wanted to take us down memory lane just a little bit. Back to 2018, there were 2 headlines that we gave. One was that there was as you said, a $2 to $3 billion giving gap amongst the Indian American population. And to add insult to injury, we were giving less relative to every level of the American population at every single income level. And so now I want to ask you that question, which is, how did I make you feel?
Terrible. If I could, just take the mic. So, we did this study and we were expecting Indian Americans would give a lot more, right? And we found they didn't give a lot more, but they did give a lot of time. But after the study, though, there are a couple of nuances. One is we give to India, we remit money to India. Some of that goes to families or charities. Those are not accounted in the tax forms in the US, right? So there's some things we have to also provide for. Is this informal giving to your village or to your family or friends in India? So I think I can give that. That was a part of it. The other big surprise was the volunteer effort was huge. And so when we did the study this year, I'm really interested in seeing what else changed. But yeah, we didn't feel that good at that time. But hopefully India Giving Day, the Philanthropy Summits, COVID came and India Diaspora raised money, 15 million for India. All these things I think have added up over time. Hopefully it resulted in something.
Yeah, indeed. And I remember being in that room and almost feeling like there was a fight erupting. There were people looking at me like giving me daggers. We're sending money to India. We are philanthropists. Other people being like, no, we're not giving enough. And I remember there was one gentleman in particular, Sunil Wadhwani, many of you may know him. He boldly stood up and then he said, okay, who cares if the data is right or wrong or whether we've got every single decimal dotted? What if we just try to triple our giving? Yeah? No. And so I'm here in a really happy place today to tell you we've basically done exactly that. Nothing like being given a performance improvement plan to a bunch of overachieving people to get them to get their act together. So to your question, now we're giving about $4 to $5 billion a year. That represents 4 to 5% of our incomes. And it represents about 2 to 3 times what we were giving in 2017. It's a huge, huge amount of progress. And that's happened primarily because of 2 reasons. Number one, in that same stretch, what we have seen is incomes have risen. And so even for, like for like, you're giving the same percentage because your incomes have risen, people are giving more. The other, and I think this is the piece that's really something to be proud of, is that as people are becoming more wealthy, they have increased their portion of giving relative to their income. And if you look at, there's a graph somewhere in there, I think it's figure 4 or something in the report, what you'll see is actually once families hit, the $300,000, $400,000 of income level, actually we now surpass the broader American population in terms of our income as a percentage of, or giving in terms of as a percentage of our overall income. So I think that's just tremendous progress in just a decade. And so yeah, Nalini, I think it is a very happy moment for us, right? It's an incredibly happy moment for us to say, okay, we got a message, we heard it, and we worked really hard to deliver. I think it's really important to recognize that this is not a story just about the numbers, right? It's about what you can create when you give. And I think it's really important to put philanthropy in broader context. It is so important to think about what philanthropy can do and how catalytic it can be. So when you think about it, yes, it is the programs, it is the service delivery, it is the day-to-day of getting meals on the ground, delivering water, helping communities organize, driving their leadership and their own empowerment. But it's also that systems change. I think that's also what we have been learning over, especially the last 10 to 15 years. Philanthropy fills this really important and missing void that many other parts of our society, whether you think about the capital markets or government, often don't or fail to fill. And so when you look at that, what is possible, right? It's a place for innovation, talking about topics that are about to come but are not yet on people's agenda, like aging, for instance. It is about funding innovation in R&D. It is about, driving policy change, building government capacity. And I think it's that potential that makes me really excited about the kind of numbers that we're seeing today, because it's those numbers that create, when you match the resources to the scale and the nature of the problem, that you're really able to create societal impact.
So, Amy, most of us know what Giving Tuesday is in the US. It's an incredible engine of giving. I think you raised some $3.6 billion in one day in 2024 alone. And that is truly incredible. But I love also what you call it, a movement of generosity. So I wanted us to understand here, everybody, what Giving Tuesday is like in India. What are your numbers? What is your focus? What is the mobilization that you've achieved? And then the purpose of your new research that you have, Udarta. Can you tell us a little bit more about all that?
Thank you. I also love that Giving Tuesday started as a day to do good and then grew into this global generosity movement in 111 countries. And India's been part of that story for a long time, since 2017. And given the outsized role that India played in the global movement, in 2022, we established a Giving Tuesday India Hub. So we have a team dedicated to growing generosity as a way of life in India, and it's working. Last year, they recorded record participation, thousands of people giving funding, giving their time, giving in all kinds of small ways to better their communities. But what people don't necessarily know about Giving Tuesday is that the movement is really fueled, and you'll like this, Nalini, by data and insights. So there's a Giving Tuesday Data Commons, which is the world's largest philanthropic data collaboration focused on understanding generosity. And the Data Commons in our India Hub partnered together with hundreds of social sector organizations across the country on a study that they call Using Data and Research to Advance Everyday Giving in India, Udarta, which is why I'm here today, to share some of those findings. And we learned, as it's already come up multiple times, that nonprofits are engaging volunteers in huge ways. 70% of the 304 organizations that were part of this study said that they engage volunteers who give their time, their skills, their voice to their causes. That's really a significant proportion. Only 37% are engaging everyday givers in their fundraising strategies. That's unfortunate because those who do find it overwhelmingly worthwhile. A third of their budgets is constituted by everyday givers' donations, not corporates, not major donors, but ordinary people who are giving what they can to causes that they care about in India, right? So why isn't everybody, all nonprofits, engaging everyday users is what we ask, because they provide that unrestricted, flexible, sustained support. We found that most of the reasons are internal, right? I think it was 40% report limited team capacity, 25% reported resource constraints, 37% noted knowledge gaps, another 24% said they don't know about volunteer management strategies. But the good news is that's all internal. It's fixable. It's within our control. It doesn't speak to either the motivations or the opportunities because India people are generous. I don't know if you've seen the How India Give reports that the Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy published. But it says the major reason why urban Indians aren't giving is because they haven't been asked. It's not that they don't want to give. The motivation is there. Similarly, only 2.7% of the nonprofits in our study said that they don't think that everyday giving is important to their organization's sustainability. They know that engaging everyday givers is important, but they need support. And that's where philanthropy and donors come in. Investing in nonprofits' ability to engage everyday givers can completely transform the social sector and its resilience in India.
So much food for thought. I would love to delve deeper into each one of your questions, but let me come back to Swetha. Swetha, it is really exciting that we have tripled our giving in as a community in the US, and it's most gratifying that the wealthier people are giving more as a percentage of their income. So that shows that we have taken responsibility, we're at the top of the heap. So we also have to give at the top of the heap, and that is something we are owning. So we have matured as an overseas group, just like the overseas Chinese and the Jewish community. We have arrived, I feel, in every way, as your research showed us. So what's next? For diaspora philanthropy, how can we reduce that gap that still exists? You said we don't quite give as at the same level as the average American. How can we? What insights do you have, particularly for next generation donors?
Absolutely. And I want to build on what Amy started with, which is I think at the core of this, we need to meet people where they are. And so one of the things that's really coming out of this study is people want to give more. Many people actually don't feel like they are giving enough or even relative to their potential. And so it's actually about building the infrastructure and the ecosystem that enables people to understand, to get the knowledge, to get the community, all the things that help people say, okay, I now know what to do. I can do it confidently, and I have the connections to actually bring my desires, my passions to life. And so these are actually very simple things that we need to go and spend time doing now. I think anyone who works in the corporate world knows you may have some outcomes that you're working toward, but the focus needs to be religiously on the inputs. And I think it's our time to focus on the inputs. It's the inputs like, creating the lists of trusted sources, helping people understand which nonprofits to invest in, spending time curating and building communities of engagement and community giving circles. That's the stuff that's going to make a real big difference to the people who want to give and give more today. So in some ways, the organizations like India Diaspora, IPA, Accelerate India Philanthropy, DASRA, this is all their roles, right? Is to serve that bridge between philanthropists and nonprofits and help them connect so that there's less of a gap. And the second is, there is something that we need to do in terms of better supporting women philanthropists. What we see is that they volunteer more than men, actually quite significantly more than in diaspora men, but they give less. And in many ways it comes because they feel like, hey, we have other priorities and needs that we need to fulfill. And they also come from a question of how much agency they have over their own financial resources and the like. But what is very, very clear is they want to give. They especially want to give to gender equity, where there's a big passion donation gap that still exists today, even after 7 years. And what they are really craving is direct engagement, especially with giving circles. And so I think there's a big opportunity in how we think about some of the gender differences. And when it comes to next gen, I think we're just at the right moment to be having this conversation. The thing that is so exciting about next gen is that there's 2 or 3 things happening all at the same time. One, next gen's interests in philanthropy are starting to rise at exactly the same time that wealth is beginning and will be transferred to them over the next 20 years. And so we have an incredible opportunity right now to begin those conversations. It is true. Next gen donors right now, they're in their professional careers, they're building their families, they are busy. And so they are asking for, just give me resources, make it easy, simple click of a button. Many are also asking, just ask me. It's exactly what you said, Amy. 1/4 of them in our study also said no one's ever asked. In addition to that, I think we have an incredible opportunity to start family conversations about money. And I say that because actually those don't often happen and they become very, very messy very quickly. And many people, probably many of you in this room, are in this process right now where you're thinking about, how do I set up my will? What do my trusts look like? What is the structure? But as you all know, form follows function, which means you have to have a conversation of what is the purpose of my money? What is the purpose of our family money? What are we going to do with it? And so I think this is also an invitation to begin those conversations, make it not messy, and then also think about how do you transition power and influence over to the next generation, perhaps earlier than we had planned. This is one of the things that many studies who look at next gen giving find over and over again. Younger people know, I know I'm going to get an inheritance. Yes, the wealth is going to be transferred, but I have literally no power over how it's going to be used. And I'm scared. I'm scared because now I feel the obligation to preserve it and do everything I can to just make number go up. And so if that's actually not the objective, and philanthropy is a big priority for the family, those are conversations that need to happen now. And I would encourage many of you in this room to go back and have that conversation with next gen.
Yep. So, opens my eyes. I run this nonprofit Arogya World, and we are small. We're a $1.5 million organization, and from my side, homework is look at that next gen. It's something we haven't quite focused and done. So there's a lot of insights that everybody here is going to, think about, reflect on, and take home. So, Amy, I wanted to touch on one other aspect for which we are famous. We volunteer. Both reports, as well as the 8 years ago report from Dalberg, showed that we volunteer as a community. So, tell us a little bit more about what your research has shown. And interestingly, Giving Tuesday's research was with nonprofit organizations. Dalberg's research was with individual donor givers here in the US. So, tell us what your research has shown about volunteer.
Well, I think probably the research showed some really fascinating stories about motivations for why you're engaging volunteers. And we only have a short time, so I'm going to share the top three. But for most nonprofits, they said 66% of them said that the primary reason they're engaging with volunteers is because it builds their visibility and it builds community champions. So their volunteers are also ambassadors for their causes. They're sharing through word of mouth, through social media, the stories of their nonprofits, and this has an exponential reach for very limited cost. So that's the number one reason. The second, and this is my favorite reason, 59% of nonprofits are engaging volunteers because they build communities of purpose. Not just filling roles, but they're actually creating an ecosystem of like-minded people who receive energy. Those volunteers get energy from being part of this community, and it also brings energy to those nonprofit organizations. And then the final reason, which most of you probably could have guessed, 53% of organizations are engaging volunteers because of the operational capacity they bring. This can be highly skilled and strategic. Those organizations view volunteers as an extension of their teams. They're designers, they're facilitators, and they're lending their skills and expertise in a way that doesn't add payroll costs, which is also very important to nonprofit organizations.
Great. Amy, one more for you. I was intrigued to learn that 1/3 of the funding of Indian nonprofits comes from everyday givers, not corporates or high net worth individuals, but everyday givers. So build for us a case then, Amy, for why nonprofits should consider everyday givers as a strategic part of their fundraising efforts in India. And what tools can we provide them?
That's a big question. I love it. I mean, I think everybody should consider everyday givers an important aspect of their strategy. For Giving Tuesday, we care because we think everyday givers embody our common humanity, our innate generosity. We know that when someone gives, it's not only the recipient who benefits, the giver increases their own well-being. Our research, the civic intent research we're doing, it's showing that it builds bridges in communities when you engage in acts of generosity. That was a terrifying sign to see.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to get to your point. The nonprofits that we were engaging with, the primary reason that they valued everyday givers, for me, was surprising. 65% say the most important aspect of this engagement is because it builds authentic relationships with our communities. Mm-hmm. And those authentic relationships have a multiplier effect in terms of the benefits that it brings the organizations. It's not just the money. They become volunteers, they become advocates, and they amplify those causes. So I think that's really important. And just one more point on this. It's just like everybody, everywhere can give. Every organization can effectively engage everyday givers. Our study showed that there was zero correlation the researchers in the room are going to get onto me. Minimal, almost correlation between organizational characteristics and their effectiveness in engaging everyday givers. It doesn't matter how long they've been in existence, how big they are, what their issue area is, whether they're rural or urban. You can be a rural education organization 2 years old with a $20,000 budget, or an urban health organization that's been around 30 years with $1 million budget. And there's no difference in your ability and your capabilities of engaging everyday givers as a critical source of support.
So thank you. We are short of time, and I have one really important question to ask Swetha. You have some tantalizing numbers in your report, Swetha, about how far Indian Americans can aspire to. We are not giving at 0.5% that average Americans give, but if we went to 1% of our income, what would we aspire? But just paint that picture for us, because it is very inspiring.
No one's ever told me my numbers are tantalizing, so I'm just very happy. I'm going to send this back to my team. So let's start with this. I think it's just huge progress over the last decade. I think in just a few years, we're going to close the $1 billion gap that remains in our giving gap. And when we were looking at this, what we felt like is, hey, this is not just about closing a gap. This is about our ability as a community to set the standard. And that means that we need to think about this differently. We have everything that we need to be gold standard of what it means to give and give well and create change. We have the skills, we have the networks, we have the resources, we have the influence. All of the work that India Diaspora has done to show the impact of the Indian American community points to this. And so when you think about, you have all of the things, all of the ingredients that is required to create change, that is what caused us to say, okay, let us begin and think about how we can aspire to do better. And to very tangibly answer your question, I think there's two things that we need to be thinking about. One is on the income side, right? And if you think about, best practices around income, what you also hear is, hey, it's not about 5% just meeting whatever the average American is doing from an income perspective. It's actually, religious organizations say this, organizations really focused on giving and give guidance to say, actually, the best practice is 10%, right? And so if you looked at that, 10% of our incomes alone would mean that we could give $10 billion a year as a community. The second,
10 billion.
10 billion, yeah. The second is on the wealth. And this is probably an even more ambitious aspiration, but I think it's absolutely possible. So if you look at our wealth as a community, the projections suggest that in 20 years, we will have $2 trillion of wealth. Giving away 1% of that a year, just 1%, right, is $20 billion a year. So I want to put that in context, right? $20 billion is a lot of money. Maybe not in Silicon Valley where $20 billion checks are written every day. But in our world of social impact, $20 billion is a huge amount of money. $20 billion amount of money is what it took to eradicate polio. 10 billion, 20 billion, the 10 billion from income, 20 billion from wealth that I just described, 30 billion. That's the official development assistance from the second largest country every year. That's Germany, right? So that tells you the size of the influence and potential. But I think even that does not speak to our potential. If you think about Giving Pledge and these other institutions that have been working to say, what is the max capability of people to give away their wealth? You see people, especially billionaires, and we've got over 12 billionaires in the Indian American community in America already. People suggest giving up to 50% or even more of their wealth. And so I think the possibilities are immense. I think these numbers are breathtaking. And I have no doubt in my mind that over the next decade, we are going to see the potential translate into reality.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm inspired by this completely, Hey, we have to just giving a little bit individually and all of us together, and I will get to these incredible impact figures. I know we're out of time. I know you have questions. There is a poll. Please answer it, and you've already started. What is the one finding from the study that most surprised you? A lot did, but please answer that. And then if you have questions, please ask. I know you are. We have time. Thank you. Because the topic is amazing. So, yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm from Vrishti Foundation, and we participated in India Giving Day, and we had maximum donations from youth. And that my son was able to mobilize because he could do that because I took him to the remote villages in India, in Bihar, and when he saw that, it was so easy for him to reach out to the Jewish frat and his college people asking for money. And then those people for donations for India Giving Day, and those people said that we've never been asked. So the simple thing of taking the Gen Z and having them meet the beneficiaries, and when they come back, I mean, they do magic. So that's what I wanted to say. One of the things we can use.
So, are there questions on Slido that we can go to, or if you have questions here, please. Yes. Somebody bring a mic, or there we go. Thank you. We can share one here.
Yeah, I noticed in the chart here that people at the low income level are giving much less than the people in the US, the Indians compared. I wonder if some of that is because, in the US, they give a fair amount to churches, right? But that may not be reflected among Indians because they tend to just put it in the hundi or give other means that may not be, I don't know how much of it this is religion versus.
It's a good question. I would say, look, we asked the question, you were allowed to say that you gave for religious causes. So I don't think that fully explains it. I think what did happen after COVID is that people who did not have excess incomes necessarily, they were the people who felt like they couldn't give as much, right? It doesn't explain the gap though. And my hypothesis there is that you still have people who are in the place where they're still giving and sending back money to their families. It's a remittance hypothesis. And it's only after a certain level of income, a certain level of wealth, that you feel like you have enough to contribute more broadly. And that's a pattern that I think we've seen across generations.
So, are there questions on Slido? Oh, can the Slido screen go to the questions that are being asked? And then, yes, one more from the audience, and then we'll go to the Slido. Why is Slido not showing to us?
Can you share?
No, that's still the one. Question from the audience. Go ahead.
I'm Pankaj Agarwal. A quick question, which is that for first-time givers, so there are people that believe that I've given $25, $50, that's all I need to give, and these are people that have limits. How do we get them over that threshold of moving from $50 or $100 to giving 1% or 5% or 10%? And this is for an Indian audience.
And can we take one more? Just answer these two questions and we'll wrap up. Okay.
Maybe just on that last point with recurring giving, from a nonprofit perspective, it's interesting that there's a couple of things that can happen to make sure that you get repeat donations. One of those is use your existing team and networks. So your internal fundraising teams outperform outsourced approaches every single time because they have those relationships. And this is true for volunteering as well. Your internal team recruits volunteers has twice the success as using an external agency. There's also a tech aspect to this. Very simple tech for nonprofits has huge impact and dividends. So just having automated mailers, being able to segment a CRM, you have 18% more repeat donors than organizations that don't have a way of doing that. So from a nonprofit perspective, there's some really easy, low-cost investments that can be made that can guarantee donor retention. But maybe from a motivation.
Yeah, maybe I can touch on the first question as part of that, which is this idea of how do you get people to give more and more? And I think it comes down to, what creates purpose and a sense of community. And this is what we saw in the last study. It's what Amy said in her work, which is, for instance, volunteering begets giving, giving begets volunteering. And there's a really nice cycle that creates a nice circular loop there, right? So I think that's one. I think this is also why we are really speaking to the power of giving circles. What I've seen in giving circles is, people show up, maybe they're asked to donate $500 or $1,000 just to come into the circle, but they become engaged. They become engaged with a network, a community, a peer circle. They start talking about their interests, their shared interests, the change they're trying to create in the world. And then their motivation, their commitment to the issues become larger. Then they start giving a little bit more, they give more time, they volunteer. And then all of a sudden they're become even more committed. And that's how you see the numbers go up in terms of how much people give monetarily, how much they give in terms of their time. And that kind of continues the loop.
So unfortunately, we're going to have to close this session. It's really exciting for me to see this. I know all the nonprofits here are going to study those both reports and take home some learnings. We'll also get the two speakers as well as others to answer every question that you've asked. So please ask them. Please ask them, because really the aim was to get every voice heard. So we will be answering those. And last point, if you want to edit that communique, please do, because that's also an output from today that's going to come out. So thank you very much, Amy and Shweta, for giving us so much empathy and for so many insights, including the very simple one, ask, then you will get. Thank you.